Okay, it says we're live, so
All right.
we'll find out.
Can we see how many people? We probably can. So
I can.
if
Yep.
we have 5 people, well, no, that would be different, wouldn't it, for YouTube?
And I went ahead and started the slideshow to get that first slide up. Are we still good on your end?
So I just have Tony's face right now first up for people to see. Do you want me to pull?
Say that again, Suzanne.
I just have Tony's face on right now for his piece, but do you want me to have the slides up too right now as well?
It doesn't matter to me. I tell you what, let me get out of that. And I was still sharing my screen and didn't realize it. Let me stop sharing for a moment. Okay, I see Tony now in the still picture of Suzanne. So this is kind of where we were the last couple of days with Kenton City Schools. And I'll just go to present now when the time comes.
Perfect.
And slideshow mode and hope all that works well. If it doesn't, we'll figure it out.
Yep, that sounds good. I'm looking to see if it's available on YouTube yet.
It feels a little bit narcissistic to say, can you guys see me on your screen?
All right, right now we have 5 people watching. So let me double check that. I'll be back.
We've certainly learned a lot during these times, haven't we, Derek?
Boy, we have. It's I was just sharing with the school recently, Tony, that it seems like, and this overly simplifies it a little bit, and this is even in today's presentation, it seems like schools fall into one of 2 buckets. They're either ready, not necessarily ready for coronavirus, who could have seen this coming, but they're ready for adversity, they're ready for change, they're just poised to act the way that they need to.
I think people are seeing, I just got a text, people are able to hear and see you guys right now, so.
Okay, very good.
Got it, awesome.
I have 9:30, but we'll wait just a little bit, Suzanne, is that right?
Yeah, let's wait a few more minutes just to make sure that we get people on here. So Tony, everybody can see your face right now, just FYI.
Okay. All right. I feel bad for them. Can you tell by how many's logged in if we have most folks yet, Suzanne?
I only see 28 views right now, so
okay.
I'm not sure. I might send a reminder out real quick.
This morning said 9:45 on that, so I don't know if that's why people aren't. Amy Sykes, when she gave us the safety thing, she said 9:45.
Ah.
So that might be why people aren't
Okay.
While we're waiting for everyone to log in, I am getting some feedback that principals can see, and our esteemed Dr. Encroft said any extra food would be welcome in the principal's office.
Always.
And some people are saying they got onto the YouTube page and if they are on there, they need to refresh so they can see it too. So let's give them a few more minutes here because I think.
Okay.
And I think somebody told me something else was sent out and it said 9:45 instead of 9:30. So I'm not sure.
Oh, okay.
So we may need to wait a few more minutes.
As long as we need to wait, guys, that's good with me. I've got nothing else behind this until much later.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, I think I'm getting texts from principals that people are on. They're not sure why the numbers are low on YouTube because they feel like a lot of people are on. So I think we're pretty
Okay,
good.
you think we're ready?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Just checking my text here.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, I think everybody is on. So from what I'm hearing from principals, I think we're good. So Tony, I'll let you.
All right, we'll get started.
Yeah.
Thanks, Suzanne, for all you did to make that happen. And
Yep.
it's great to, it was great driving in this morning as I was passing some folks heading back to the buildings, and it was just, it was nice to see some things back to the way they were. So good morning and welcome back. I do want to begin by saying if there is a glitch with the live technology, we are recording today's message and we will make sure everyone has access to it if we do experience any technical difficulties, but we don't expect to. I hope everyone found their assigned room today for the presentation without too much trouble. To those of you who are hosting a classified employee, please take time to get to know each other during our time together. And it's just a great example of Thunderbolts serving Thunderbolts, and we're better when we build relationships, so this is another opportunity for that. I'll start by just saying this has been a unique several months we have navigated together. There have been challenges, but we need to see these times as opportunities to refine ourselves and continue to grow. I'm excited today to introduce our speaker. His name is Derek Avra, and I believe the message you will hear today will be right for your ears as we prepare to open the year differently, but with the same goal, and that is to teach kids. And we want to teach kids to the best of our ability. Think back to January 1, 2020, January 1st. Perhaps you made a New Year's resolution. How different would that resolution be if you knew what the future would bring? For many of us, the importance of that resolution may not even seem all that important now after what we've experienced during the pandemic. Each year, I kind of go through a process at the beginning of each year to try to make myself a little bit better. And that started about 3 years ago when I discovered a book entitled One Word That Will Change Your Life. If you haven't read it, I apologize for running the first few chapters here, but basically the challenge is to pick one word and concentrate on it to improve yourself. I ended up buying the book for the rest of my family members a few years ago, and at our holiday gatherings each year, we share how we did with our word that year, and then we choose a new word for the upcoming year. And it's been a great bonding experience for our family. The first year I chose the word be. You probably find that to be a strange word to choose. But as a professional, I often find myself taking my worries home. So I concentrate on being with my wife. When I was with her, I wanted to be present. I concentrated on being with my son when I was with him. In other words, working on being present to him. I also tried to work a little bit more on my conversations. I think I'm developing ADHD as an adult. I don't know, but I find myself thinking about a million things when people are talking to me, and that's no different today as we can find a lot of distractions. But when I'm working through those conversations, I try to concentrate on honoring the person I'm speaking with, the person in my office, by being present. I do not know how far I progressed, but the fact that I was aware of it and that I need to make an improvement there, I think I have improved. And it's an important thing that we do. And so I know that when you enter my office now, it will never be the same because you'll know I'm concentrating on being present with you. That's a good thing. I do want to be present with you. The second year, I chose joy. My favorite extended relative passed away, and she had always been the one to bring joy to every gathering. She was part of, so I just wanted to carry on that in her passing. I worked to balance my natural inclination, and that's the complete task with a singular focus, with trying to have fun and engaging others. I will never replace what she brought to our family gatherings, but I am conscious of my ability to create memories within our family, and also to remember to bring joy to the workplace, to have some fun. Again, how successful have I been? I'm not sure, but again, I think I'm improving, and I'm a work in progress. This year, I chose the word content. Now, stop and think about the events of the last several months and consider how well the word content sits with you, whether it be the pandemic or the racial unrest in this country. The reason I chose content is that I wanted to grow as a person and recognize that the best things in life are relationships and not always chasing what our culture values as important. As we progress through the last few months, I do not think I could have picked a better word to try to make myself a little bit better. Many of you may say, why is content the right word for these times? The reason I feel content was the right word for me during this time is that we must be interested in changing ourselves and feeling good about ourselves before we can be a change agent for good. And this is a time for change agents for good. So I'm not content where this country is with race relations, but I am becoming content with the fact that I want to be a part of the solution to this issue. The contentment comes from making decisions to read more books about equity, to make myself more vulnerable, by admitting that I have implicit biases, and I want to change that reality. I am content in that I want to see the world in a new and better way. I want not to be, I'm not only not want to be more empathetic, but I want to understand that I need to understand the lives of others better to know how to not only be empathetic, but to take action, to be a part of the solution. The next question you might ask yourself is, how does the word content relate to the worldwide pandemic? Well, I would say the event has reminded me that I am not nearly as in control as I would like to be. And I've learned to be content with that premise. I understand that in my role at Northmont, I am in charge of giving our students the best education possible. I'm reminded that we teach kids. That is what we need to do. And so no matter how many distractions, I'm learning to be content with the reality of a pandemic. That fear does not stop us from believing we can teach kids to the best of our ability. So I can control that we can explore new platforms to enhance our remote offerings. I can learn to empathize with staff, parents, and students who are concerned about remote learning and explore ways to break down the gaps that could develop in relationship building and find ways to still build relationships with our staff, students, and families. I can be content in knowing that we are developing tools that will make us better at achieving our main goal, and that is still to teach kids. We will be better at teaching kids right now as we return to school on September 1. And when we get through this pandemic on the other side, can you imagine how elite we will be when we couple the tools we have now with the ability to teach our students face to face? In other words, we can turn this thing upside down and make Northmont even better because we concentrate on what we can do rather than what we can't.
That's right.
I believe we can teach our students, and I find contentment in knowing we can. We are creating a culture of community, of robust learning, and relationship building. Even though we will not start the year doing so in a traditional fashion, we will start the year knowing we will do all we can to break down barriers to learning and to expect greatness. We will expect greatness from our students. My hope today is that you believe in you and you believe in those around you. I believe in you and know that we will be ready. And more importantly, we will believe that we can teach kids. That is why I am content, even in the midst of the admitted challenges that we will face this year. As I mentioned at the beginning, my real purpose is to introduce our speaker today, Derek Abra. I know many of you are acquainted with the organization Focus 3. That is who Derek works for. And I know that you know them because when you come back from various conferences and so forth, and you hear this organization's presentation, you come back and say, we need to do this at Northmont. I wholeheartedly believe that the work Focus 3 does is essential for the growth of this district as we go from great to elite. I cannot think of a better person to introduce many of you to the work than Derek. Our goal is to take a great culture at Northmont and elevate it to elite. And this starts at the individual level. Derek will introduce to you how this works. So with a warm remote welcome, I present to you, Derek Abra.
Oh, thank you, Tony. I appreciate it. Great comments. I'm going to click. I think 4 clicks gets us to where I can share my screen. And hopefully you guys are seeing a PowerPoint slide. And then another click will get us into slideshow mode. Can you confirm you're seeing one slide that says Focus 3 with our logo on it?
Not yet. I will.
Not yet.
Hang on.
Not seeing that yet. Okay.
I've got to get us back in that. I had Tony pinned, so hang on.
Oh, got it. Okay, I'm with you. I thought, boy, I could have sworn I clicked all the right places.
I think you did. There we go.
Okay, so we're good now, Suzanne?
You are good.
Awesome. Well, then we'll take it away.
Great.
It is absolutely my pleasure to be here with you today. I'm so pumped up about getting to be here. I will just start and tell you that my only regret about today and the next hour, we'll probably spend a little bit over an hour together. Hopefully it goes quickly for you. I know it will for me. My only regret is that we're not in the same room together today. But as Tony alluded to a couple of times, and quick side note, absolutely loved his comments, and especially 4 words. I hope you caught them. He said, "I believe in you." And isn't that important to hear right now in the midst of the craziness that we're going through? But I wish we could be together in person. This is the next best thing. I'll introduce myself in just a moment. For now, let me go ahead and introduce our organization. I know some of you are familiar with Focus 3, and mainly because we are an Ohio-based company. We're based right there, not far from you, in Columbus. Last year, I made 21 trips to Columbus. I'm now considered an honorary Buckeye. But I'm coming to you from Dallas. We have 2 remote consultants. I was the first of those. About a year after I came on board, we hired a great gentleman who's over in North Carolina. And you can remember me easily as Derek from Dallas. And like I said, I'll introduce myself just a little bit more in a moment. If you're wondering about Focus 3, we primarily focus on, pardon the pun, schools, businesses, and athletic teams. We're doing more and more with nonprofit organizations, but it's primarily those 3 vertical markets, if you will: education, for-profit businesses, and athletics. And if you're wondering about the 3 in our name, okay, Focus 3, where does the 3 come from? It's that last bullet right there. Our focus is on leadership, culture, and behavior. And you're going to see all 3 of those things today. In fact, they're all on a single slide here in just a moment. We'll get to that in a few clicks. As Tony mentioned, my name is Derek Avra. I am coming to you from suburban Dallas, and this is my contact information. I put this on the screen because we are dead serious about hearing from our clientele. I worked with an Ohio school virtually a couple hours on Monday, 2 more hours early yesterday morning. When we finished, immediately I had 3 emails to this second line here, Derek@focus3.com. That's my email address. We love to hear from our clients. We love to just interact with you, take questions offline if that's more appropriate, whatever. And whether it's email or that next line, that's my cell phone number. Some people are convinced that I'm crazy to put up my cell phone number and have hundreds of people have access to that. I think just the opposite. Again, we'd love to hear from you. If you want to drop me a call, that's great. I'm a text guy like most people these days, email, whatever it is. If you prefer social media, I'm very active on LinkedIn, and here is my Twitter handle, @F3Derek. On the professional side, I am a product of the Focus 3 product. I was a client of the company, had never heard of Focus 3, nor our founder, Tim Kite, but heard TK speak once. About a year later, heard him again. In between, I was exposed to Focus 3 in Kansas City and Asheville, North Carolina. After those 4 touches, I reached out to TK and said, I'm not just intrigued by what you do, but I'm convicted by it. And I love the content and the way you deliver it. Is there any chance you need some more help? And he said, actually, you're catching us at a great time. We do need some more help. We should talk about that. That conversation started a dance that went on for about 8 months. And here we are, and they all lived happily ever after. So that's a little bit on the professional side. On the personal side, I did mention that I'm from Texas. And what's funny is I travel throughout the country and deal primarily with schools. That's my part of this Focus 3 focus. And as I travel throughout the country, some people can hear an accent, others can't. If my sweet wife were on the line with us, undoubtedly you'd say, now, sweetie, what part of Texas are you from? Answer, she's from the Panhandle part. I'm originally from Houston. And in fact, I'm even going to share with you today a couple of stories that originated in Houston. But live in Dallas now with my wife of 32 years. A week ago, we celebrated our 32nd anniversary, and we have 2 daughters. Here's how I usually answer the question, are you sure you're from Texas? I say, well, my wife's name is Tanya. I call her Sweet Tea. Our daughters are 26 and 24. Their names are Abby Kate and Savannah, and our puppies are Cotton and Biscuit. And people usually say, okay, never mind. Clearly you're from Texas. And that seems to be all it takes to convince them that I'm from the South. But I'm, as I said, so excited to spend this time with you here today. And I want to introduce the rest of what we'll do by painting a picture for you under the heading, Imagine for a Moment. So let's talk about that. Imagine for a moment that you get wind of, you hear kind of in a far off place, really, you hear word of an illness. And it doesn't necessarily bother you that much at first. You don't want anybody to be sick if you're like I am, but you don't pay too much attention to it because it seems distant. And there's a reason for that. It is distant. In fact, it's going on the other side of the world from us. But as the situation evolves, all of a sudden you realize, wait a minute, this might affect parts of the United States. And the situation evolves some more, and it becomes not just an afterthought on the news, it becomes the lead story on the news. And it continues to evolve, and eventually it becomes every story on the news, or somehow every story is related to it. And you realize this is affecting all corners of our country, and really all corners of the world, some areas more significantly than others. But this is something that we're going to have to deal with. And in fact, we may have to deal with it for a while. And the longer that this thing goes on, we realize that this is, I used to say a two-headed monster. It's not. It's a three-headed monster. You know what we're talking about. It is, there's a medical piece to this. There's an economic piece to this, of course. At one point, 43 million Americans had filed for unemployment. And as you know, there's a political piece to this. There's no escaping that when you watch your evening news. And we're talking about, of course, coronavirus. Some people call it COVID-19. Others like to abbreviate it in text or emails. I'm one of those guys and simply say CV-19. Here's my point, friends. Regardless of how you refer to it, regardless of what you call it, we're called to respond to it. And hopefully to do so with skill and grace. This has been, as you know, a major worldwide history-making event. And when our kiddos, a generation from now, and 2 and 3, read about world history, they are going to read about this thing that we're living right now called coronavirus. It has been a disruption for some. And let me just pause right there and say, if COVID, consider yourself very, very blessed, because for lots of people, it has been a game changer. And it is ushering in something that we don't even fully know what it's going to look like yet, but we know there's going to be a new norm. I loved how Tony talked about, go back to January 1st. January 1st for me often means sitting in front of a big screen and watching college football. And that's what January 1st was like for me this year. There's usually 6 games on January 1st. I watched parts of all of them. And I had heard just a week or two before little tidbits about coronavirus, but didn't pay much attention to it because it wasn't affecting my world. Maybe you were the same. But as we fast forward 7.5 months into the middle of August, who would have thought that we would be talking about new norms in our professional life and also in our personal life? But that's the reality that we face. And I mentioned this to Tony. We just started talking about it. We didn't get into it too deep at the outset, but we've discovered that there's 2 buckets of people, 2 buckets of schools. There are those that are prepared. Let me be clear. Nobody was fully prepared for COVID-19, but there are organizations, including schools, who are prepared for adversity. They're prepared for change. COVID-19 represents the perfect intersection of both. Adversity and change are not synonyms, but they often travel together. They're often related. They're cousins. And certainly that's the case with this pandemic. There are those that are prepared, and there are those that are absolutely not prepared. And you can see it and hear it even in their communication. They seem to be a ship without a rudder. What do we do next? There's no plan. And here's the reality, friends. We're going to talk about, just for, again, about the next hour, some tools to help you navigate coronavirus and the things you're dealing with today, but also metaphorically tomorrow. And that can mean literally tomorrow, the 13th. It can also mean days, weeks, months from now. And hopefully you'll pull, even if it's just one tidbit from what we talk about, this will be well worth our time. I mentioned leadership, culture, and behavior. Here it is on one slide. And let me walk you through this because it is the physics of organizational performance. We use that word in a highly intentional way. And here's what we mean. Think about a really good school, really healthy, the type of school that's prepared for adversity and change. Think about a school that's not so healthy. Think about a for-profit business making some good money, taking care of their employees, taking care of their clients. Think about a business that's struggling. A winning team, a losing team, doesn't matter. This is the physics of how organizations perform, and it goes like this. Leaders create the culture that drives the behavior that produces results. And it's very simple to reverse engineer this from right to left. If you want better results, what do you need? Better behavior. Better behavior comes from a better culture, which comes from more effective leadership. The blue arrows that you see in the middle of the slide represent, number one, a flywheel effect, but also, secondly, a feedback loop. As a good culture gets rolling, it's hard to shut that down. You don't want to. As a bad culture gets rolling, there's a snowball effect, and it's very hard to shut that down and shift gears. The feedback loop is this. Yes, culture drives behavior all day long, but your behavior reinforces your culture, does it not? Of course it does. We work with organizations all the time. In fact, I ate lunch yesterday with a superintendent of a medium-sized school district here in Texas. And we had this conversation over lunch. And we talked about how often we go somewhere and we talk about culture. It's often our first question. Tell us about your culture. And people will say, oh, we've got a great culture. It's that poster on the wall. Or some businesses say, oh, we have a phenomenal culture. We have a ping pong table in the lunchroom. And we smile at that. And here's the reality. If we could hang out with them for a week, all it would take is a week, not even that long, really. And we could either confirm that their behavior matches the things on that poster, or maybe it's a series of posters down a key hallway. If their behavior matches that, then we come back and say, while the poster isn't your culture, that poster really does a good job of representing your culture. But all too often, friends, what we find is we have this conversation, we hang out with them for a while, and we have to come back and we say it politely and professionally with a smile on our face. Hey, that poster doesn't represent your culture at all because nobody behaves that way. There's so much talk about leadership. A quick search on Amazon, any form of the word lead brings back about 200,000 results. Tons of talk about culture, especially right now in our country, and rightfully so. Tons of focus on culture. Behavior is the missing link. It is the number one variable in any organization, including schools. Last question. I want you to think about this and we'll keep moving forward. Think about the results that Northmont chooses to track or measure. Is there any result that you keep your finger on the pulse of that result that's not directly related to behavior? If we were in a workshop together or even a keynote together and I asked that question, what you would probably hear is crickets in the background. We've never had a school, a business, or an athletic team say, yeah, Derek, we measure a dozen key things that have nothing to do with behavior. We've never had anybody answer that question or take that challenge and be able to determine something important that's not a result, that's not directly related to behavior. Let's keep moving and let's talk a little bit more about culture before we shift our focus more to behavior. What is culture? And ultimately, we ask this question, culture is whose responsibility? Well, we believe that culture is a combination of, there's all sorts of answers for this, none of them necessarily wrong. Here's our definition. Culture is a combination of what you believe, how you behave, and ultimately the experience that you deliver to others. That can be one-on-one, that can be team to team. Your team has a culture, of course it does. That can be inside, metaphorically, the four walls that represent your district. It can also be, of course, delivering an experience outside those four walls. And the answer to the second question there in white font is a simple one. Culture is the responsibility of everyone. You'd be amazed how many times that we ask people, where you work, your place of business, culture's whose responsibility? And the answer is some form of the word management or leadership. The reality is culture is everyone's responsibility. The purpose of culture is to energize and sustain. That is to get it going and continue the behavior that wins in accordance with your strategy, in your case, your education strategy. And it leads to this power statement. We've got a few of them sprinkled throughout this slide deck. And this is a key one. It's a truism. If you get culture right, nothing can stop you. If you get culture wrong, nothing can help you. It's that important. And it leads us to one of our foundational principles. As Tony talked about, many of you may be familiar with Focus 3. For those that are, you may be familiar with something that we call 20 square feet. And it is a metaphor. Don't get hung up on the math. This isn't about an area that's 4 by 5 or 2 by 10. It's not about that. Instead, this is a sphere of ownership, a metaphor that represents your sphere of ownership in this case, your school district. But there's more to it than that. I'll get to that in just a moment. The key word within your 20 square feet is control. You own what goes on in your 20 square feet. Nobody believes for you. Nobody behaves for you. Nobody gets to determine the type of experience that you deliver in your 20 square feet. Keyword control. Outside of your 20 square feet, we like 2 I words together: impact and influence. And you get to impact what goes on at a classroom level or a team level. You get to influence what goes on at a school level, a building level, even a district level. But make no mistake, you control what goes on in your 20 square feet. When you came to Northmont, they may not have realized it or not, you may not have realized it or not, but they gave you 20 square feet of the district. And you get to control what goes on in there. Now, that's the professional piece. There's a personal side to this as well. And simply put, you own 20 square feet of your family. Your family has a culture. My family has a culture. You own 20 square feet of your family, just like I own 20 square feet of my family. And what's amazing about this principle of 20 square feet is that it travels with you. You own 20 square feet of your community. Wherever it is that you live, you own 20 square feet. You own 20 square feet of our country, just like I do. When you travel, you own 20 square feet of the airport or the highway or the freeway, and on it goes. And lastly, you get an opportunity to determine just how good you're going to be in your 20 square feet. Culture is built 20 square feet at a time. And you get to determine how elite you're going to be in your 20 square feet. Don't let that word intimidate you. It tends to intimidate some people. Don't let it. Elite, simply put, is the best version of you. And we work a lot with schools. I've already talked about that. That is often with adults. But we have a number of opportunities to work directly with the kiddos. And when we talk primarily with like middle school up, the high school kids love this. They eat it up. They say, best version of me. That's really cool. How do I do that? Answer: you're better today than you were yesterday, knowing full well you'll be better tomorrow than you are today. And the other thing that this does, when you are comparing yourself only to yourself, to the best version of yourself, not to others, it delivers from what we like to call the tyranny of comparison. Meaning, there's so many people, kids do this, and some people never outgrow it. They'll sit there and scroll through their social media avenue of choice, and they'll think these things, sometimes even say them out loud. Well, I wish I lived in that kind of house. Wish I had that kind of car or truck. Wish my spouse looked like that. Wish my kids won those kind of awards. Wish we were on that kind of vacation, etc., etc. And when you get away from the comparison game, which no one wins, and instead will compare yourself only to the best version of yourself, more on that when we get to the very end, then it delivers from this phrase, and I love this phrase, the tyranny of comparison. One of our other foundational teachings is the idea of discipline over default. And while the friction, the fight that goes on inside all of us, it's a battle. Most people don't even know what's going on. But there's a battle inside all of us each day, and it's these 2 big D words right here, discipline and default. And unless you get up in the morning and in a very intentional way flip the switch and decide that you're going to be disciplined, the reality is, I've started using another D word, you tend to just drift into default. And that's where most people hang out. Yes, the big battle is discipline versus default, but there's 3 sub battles. You can be intentional or impulsive. You can act with purpose or be purposeful, or you can act on autopilot or cruise control. You can be skillful or resistant. The people who are impulsive tend to be controlled by their emotions. Okay, that's fair. Which one? The first one. People on autopilot are controlled by their habits and not the good ones. And people who are resistant, we see this a lot in education, quite honestly, is change comes, sometimes even adversity, but mainly change comes. And as it comes, there's lots of people who give it that Heisman Trophy stiff arm. I don't like change. I don't deal with change well. I don't want to change. You hear statements like that all the time from people of all different ages. And in reality, people who are resistant to growth, often a subset of that is being resistant to change, they are controlled by their comfort zone. And I say this with the greatest respect. It is true for you. It is also true for me in 2020 and beyond. Our comfort zone is an illusion. And that is especially true these days. This is my favorite of our power statements. I just love the picture that this paints. Discipline-driven people do what's effective, even though it's uncomfortable. On the other hand, most people tend to be default-driven. They're going to do what's comfortable, and maybe they've done it for years, even though it's highly ineffective. Love that slide and the picture that paints there. Let's talk for a moment about where we need to place our focus. This is a Venn diagram, concentric circles, a couple of different names for this, and it's the simplest of Venn diagrams. It's 2 circles. And we encourage you to concentrate your time, effort, energy, emotion at the intersection of what really matters and what you can influence or impact. Because when you live in one or the other, but not both, that's where frustration lives. That's where anxiety hangs out. That's where stress rears its ugly head. Think about it. If you're really focused on something that matters, of course it matters, yes, but there's nothing you can do about it. Boy, that's frustrating, isn't it? On the other hand, there's so many people who can move the needle with something, but you get them to slow down and really think about it and not sure it really matters. But instead, hang out at the intersection of what matters and what you can influence or impact. This is our other really foundational piece as the on-ramp to get to a system that we call the R factor that we're going to talk about at a high level today. And if you've seen any of our stuff, you may have been introduced to this acronym. And it's BCD, obviously, and it stands for blame, complain, and defend. And you see this universal no sign, and we encourage you to eliminate BCD from your 20 square feet. We encourage you to eradicate BCD from those 20 square foot areas around you that you can influence and impact, especially at that team level or classroom level. So many people, when things don't go their way, they blame others. Sometimes they blame an arbitrary event. How many people right now are blaming COVID-19 for their lot in life? Okay, I get it, but that's an uncontrollable. There's nothing we can do about that. It matters, but we can't really influence that. The C is the big one here. It's complain. And people tend to complain to others. They complain about others. They complain about situations. People who are really good at the C recruit others into it. They don't tend to go in a closet and think, I want to complain about this, but I don't want it to infect anybody else. So I'm going to go in a broom closet. I'm going to complain and not let anybody else see it. Most people don't operate that way. And then finally, there's people who are defensive, primarily defending their own actions, but sometimes a leader will defend the action of a favorite, and that favoritism tends to infect the other people on the team, and that's not good. But whether you're big on the B, the C, the D, or all of the above, we recommend strongly that you eliminate this from your 20 square feet. Okay, Derek, what should I do in lieu of this? Just about anything is more productive than this. But let me point you to 2 R words that we use together in this context, resolution and resilience. To me, the opposite of BCD is a group of people, professional people, walking into a conference room, throwing out a problem onto the table, not for purposes of BCDing about it, but for purposes of trying to solve it. Resolution. And then secondly, we live in an imperfect world. You guys know that. There are not quick, easy resolutions to all issues. And sometimes we just have to deal with stuff. And when we have to deal with stuff, we recommend that you do so with resilience. And in my travels, and Tim Kite, TK says the same thing, as we travel around and talk with schools, it is the number one issue, the number one character trait that teachers seem to agree they want to pass on to the kids, because so many kids don't know how to be resilient. An issue comes along, an event, a negative event comes into their 20 square feet, and all of a sudden they're out, they're done. And there's some adults like that too, and maybe you know them. But the number one goal is resolution. If we can't get there, how do we work through this? How do we get past it? How do we get around it, above it, whatever, with resilience? Now, finally, there will be people who say, okay, what if somebody comes at me BCDing? It's a great question. And we say this, 3 very simple steps. Love them, listen to them, redirect them. Okay, Bob, I get it that you're upset about this situation. I feel you. I totally understand. What do we need to do about it? And often just that little pivot, that little redirect can get someone off of, instead of complaining about it, let's begin to think about what we do about it. The reason that we bring this up, final statement, and the reason we spend so much time on this, go all the way back to culture. This right here is the ultimate culture killer. That's why we hit it so hard and encourage you to eliminate this from your 20 square feet. I love this slide because its origin was in education, and we have applied it since to business, to athletics, to nonprofit, to healthcare, everywhere else. But I just love that it started in education and has such an amazing application. I'll set it up for you. TK was talking with a group of teachers, it's probably about a year ago-ish, and he found himself saying, hey guys, if you're not able to say the 4 things that are about to pop onto your screen, if you're not, I'll go ahead and hit it. If you're not able to say these 4 things, when you get to your school building, you pull up and you park your car, if you can't say these things, please don't go in the building, please. And we've yet to have a superintendent or principal call our office in Columbus and say, half my teachers are in the parking lot, they won't come in the building. Note the way this is phrased. Today I get to, not today I have to. Today I get to act with purpose, serve students, solve problems, bring energy. That's what educators do. Now, this is interesting. Don't miss this. Reverse the process. Let's say you've worked real hard all day on a Monday. Maybe you had a Monday on a Wednesday, is how my wife phrases that. Maybe it was a Wednesday, but it felt more like a Monday. And you drive home, and when you pull into that driveway or that garage or pull up in front of that apartment building, whatever home looks like to you, if you have a family inside, please, please, please don't walk in that door until you're able to say these things. Tonight, I get to act with purpose, serve my family, solve problems, and bring energy. Is that what educators do? Absolutely. Is this what mommies and daddies do? Answer, absolutely. Every day. Now, we've taken a while to set up this system that we call the R factor. Here's where the name comes from. It's this simple equation. Event plus response equals outcome. Notice that this slide does not say event equals outcome, but it is the sum of the event and the response. Events can be really good. They can be bad. They can be small. They can be huge. But the event plus our response equals the outcome. The mindset around this is this: I don't control events. For those of us who are control enthusiasts, that's a hard nugget to digest, that we don't control events. But the reality is we don't control events. We do, however, secondly, 100% of the time, we have the opportunity, we have the option to choose our response. We have the ability to respond. I like to call that our response ability. Thirdly, outcomes are earned by the quality of our response. And then fourthly, here's the blanket statement, the umbrella statement, and it's this. E plus R equals O is simply the way life works. It's our job to get good at it. And all we mean by that is we know not everybody's been to a workshop or heard a podcast or they wear it on their wrist. We get that. All we're saying is we live in a cause and effect world. And this is how we choose to express that. E plus R equals O. There are 6 disciplines in the R factor. I'm going to hit them fairly quickly here, and we'll make just a little bit of a deeper dive as we move on. And like I say, we'll have this wrapped up by the top of the hour. When an event comes into your 20 square feet, what do we want you to do? Answer, we want you to press pause. Okay, fair enough. Why do we want you to press pause? We want you to press pause in order to gain clarity on the event that's in front of you, but also the outcome that you want. You also press pause for purposes of getting your mind right. You press pause long enough to get your mind right and to generate the energy needed to tackle that particular situation. Teachers are a great example of a group of people who need to ramp up their energy to go tackle this thing. And when we're through with that or something else comes up that's more important or more urgent, ramp that down and ramp up this energy to go tackle something else. Get your mind right is a constant battle, really, a constant exercise in energy. Only after you press pause and get your mind right are you well positioned to step up. That's code for action. And hopefully not just any action, but disciplined action, which we would call response, versus default action, which we would call reaction. Response and reaction are not synonyms. Fourthly, and this is huge right now, friends, huge, maybe right now the most important of the 6, is adjust and adapt, and that's all about flexibility. Sometimes we adjust and adapt to changing ease. I can't tell you how many times I've been in the great state of Ohio and heard somebody say, hey, our governor is speaking today at 2:00. There's a major announcement coming. I heard it just last week. I was with schools in Ohio on Monday and Friday, 2 different schools, and I heard that statement both days. We adjust to changing events, but we also adjust to changing outcomes. And I've already mentioned that we don't live in a perfect world. That's a true statement. And when we consider E plus R equals O, sometimes we'll pick what we think is the right R, and it doesn't drive the desired O that we really wanted. That's okay. Run it back and go again and go again. And sometimes it takes several iterations, several reps is the term that we use, through the R factor to drive the outcome that you really want. Now, there's a shift here when we get to R5. The first 4, they're not inward focused. That's sends the wrong message, but they're more internal. That's fair. I need to press pause. I need to get my mind right. I will step up. I will adjust and adapt. That has to do with the things that I do, head and heart. The pivot here with R5 is we want to make sure that nobody thinks for a moment that when you respond to an event and it drives an outcome, that doesn't affect other people. But you have the opportunity to make an impact and to make a difference with people around you by the way that you manage your response. And then finally, build skill is all about growth. And this is the piece. We changed this part of our content about a year ago, and it is fantastic. Used to it was solid, but this is great. And we're going to talk about, towards the end of our time, we're going to talk about the edge and some good stuff there. So let's just touch on each one of these. Think about this as taking a rock or a stone and skimming it across a pond, and it just kind of hydroplanes. We won't make a deep dive in any of these, but we'll touch on a little bit on each of the 6. There's actually 3 pause points. When we say press pause, what we mean is there can be a proactive pause. I'll come back to that. That's incredibly powerful. There's the situational pause. I also call that the pure pause. The event has happened. We want you to pause. What do you want me to do? Pause. Get your mind right and begin to formulate how you're going to step up with the outcome in mind and reverse engineer that response to drive that outcome. The reflective pause to me is the equivalent of a good coach watching the game film and figuring out what he and the team can learn. Look back on a situation and think, okay, what went well? What didn't go so well? How do we make it better? And in fact, speaking of athletics, I like to think of these three pieces as from left to right: pregame, in-game adjustments, or if you prefer, halftime adjustments, and then finally post-game adjustments is the really the synonymous, if you will, with the reflective pause. Excuse me. I promised we'd circle back to that proactive pause. This is the piece of the R factor that's come to mean the most to me, because if you think about it, stick with me here. How many events do you deal with that are actually predictable? And how many of those predictable events, you don't just know that they're coming, but you know what? You know when they're coming. Some predictable events, we know they're coming, we don't know when, but they're on the way. And some of those predictable events are recurring. Doesn't it make sense that if we know an event is coming at some point, that we would be prepared for it, that we would mentally rehearse our response? And I like the term preload. That's how I think of it. I want to preload my response. So when I run into Dallas traffic, when I run into somebody tailgating me on the freeway, when my team loses a game I felt like they should have won, when I encounter travel delays, all of these are predictable ease in my world. And I have decided ahead of time how I'm going to respond to those. Incredibly liberating, and something that I encourage you to do, to think about predictable events in your world. We press pause for purposes of getting our mind right, and this is the favorite power statement for many of our clients. They just seem to love this. And it's the idea that just because something grabs your attention doesn't necessarily mean it deserves your attention. And we live in a world full of distractions. Many of those, if we're honest, are self-inflicted. The ability to focus is huge, but the ability to refocus, we believe in 2020 and beyond, is even more important. To get back in your lane, to jump back on the freeway, to get back down the middle of the fairway, whatever metaphor you prefer, but to refocus. And I heard this recently. I think there's great power in this. Many of us, all of us, are going to have that first thought that takes us off path. The key is not to have that second thought. Don't feed it with that third thought, that fourth thought, but instead realize, wait a minute, I've got to refocus and get back to what I'm doing. Get your mind right. It is very, very powerful. And I want to illustrate, if I could, the importance of it by telling you a quick story from my hometown of Houston. The older gentleman in the white golf cap is named Dave Williams. He was the longtime golf coach at the University of Houston and won 16 national team championships in men's golf. My dad had a chance to meet him one night and ask him, "How'd you do this, coach?" And he said, honestly, I concern myself very little with mechanics. These guys, when they come to me, they're 18 years old, give or take a year. Their golf swing is their golf swing. Their putting stroke is their putting stroke. I care little about that. I care about it, but I don't coach a lot on that. Maybe 1% of the time. The other 99% of the time, and he used this phrase, I just try to help my guys get their mind right. And my dad said, "That's awesome. What does that look like?" And he said, my dad's name is Don. He said, "Don, I can't tell you how many times I've seen a young man come into our program and he's really just kind of skated through life on the golf course, in the classroom, on natural ability. And he's convinced he's going to be able to keep doing that. And now he's on an elite team with other top college golfers, and he's not working the way he needs to work." And what I've done countless times is go to a young man, and I do it lovingly, but I'll pull him aside and I say, "Son, please know how much we love you, but you're just not going to be good enough to travel with us." And he said, "I've watched young man after young man bust his tail to get better, to be a part of this type of tradition, this type of heritage that they have at the University of Houston in the golf program." And it was all about 99% of what this man tried to do is just help his guys get their minds right. Now, before I leave this slide, I would be completely remiss if I didn't mention these other three people in the slide. You may know them, you may not, but I'll go through it quickly. To Coach Williams' left, to our right is Jim Nance. If you don't know the face, you may know the voice. He is the longtime lead sports announcer for CBS. PGA golf, NFL football, including multiple Super Bowls, and the NCAA men's basketball, primarily the basketball tournament that many of us call March Madness. He's the voice of CBS Sports. To his left is Freddie Couples, one of the most accomplished golfers ever. Silky smooth swing. Between his earnings on tour, he's now over 50, so he's on the Champions Tour. Between his lifetime earnings and endorsements, way over $100 million. In any other picture, the guy on the far left would be the hero in the picture, also a very accomplished pro golfer named Blaine McAllister. He's just not as well known on a global scale as Couples is. But here's what I'd love for you to know. These three gentlemen with Coach Williams were roommates at the University of Houston. In an athletic dorm, there's a pod system of sorts, 3 to a room. Nance, Couples, and McAllister were roommates together in one of those pods. And the story goes that Jim Nance, even back in college, dreamt of being a big-time sports announcer. He wanted to be a Bob Costas or an Al Michaels type. And so he would sit in a chair like this one in his dorm room, but before he sat down, he'd put on a blazer or a sport coat. And he'd grab something like this and pretend like it was a microphone, and he would set another chair up, and he would invite couples to come in and sit down in that chair, and he would practice interviewing couples as if couples had just won the Masters. And in 1992, they got to have that conversation. And as we talk about get your mind right, as we talk about all the things that go into getting your mind right, for Nance, he would talk about having a dream and going after it, persistence, all of those things, just focus and concentration, all of those things. He likes to tell that story, and I think it fits perfectly as we put a bow on get your mind right. Pretty cool. Let's move on. Let's talk about step up. Once we pause and get our mind right, we're well positioned to step up and to act, and not just any type of action, hopefully disciplined action. Now, the statement I'm going to make next to you, some of you may feel like, oh, that's corny or campy. Maybe that should be on a t-shirt at the mall. It doesn't make it less true. And here's the statement. In order to win the moment, we have to be in the moment. I'm going to say that again. In order to win the moment, we have to be in the moment. Go back to Tony's opening comments where he talked about having read the book about one word. I didn't realize that was a book, but I've heard about that exercise. I've done the same thing now for several years. My word last year was grateful. I've got it in script here. My wife found it. It's a Chip and Joanna Gaines thing, and we've got it right on a windowsill right there. One word, grateful. My word for this year is edge. We're going to talk about that when we get to R6. Think about Tony's word when he talked about be, as in be present. That was my wife's word last year, present. And it is the idea that we can't possibly win the moment unless we're in the moment, because so many people can't get past their past. Of course, your past is important. So is mine, if we learn from it. But some people want to wallow in their past. They don't learn from it. They just hang out there. Other people are so anxious about the future, either A, excited, looking forward to the future. Unfortunately, B is the bigger group. They anxious as in anxiety. They are so worked up about the future that they can't enjoy today. They can't be present. They can't win the moment because they're not in the moment. A big part of this is segmenting. And let me break this down a little bit for you. The next time that you have a big project, a great way to stay in the moment, instead of looking at it as one big project, assign it a number, a nice round number. I like the number 100 because it works as a percentage. And instead of looking at it as one big funky 100, think about it as 10 10s or 25s or 5 20s. But there's power in little bite-sized chunks, because once you get through that first 10%, if you'll take some time to celebrate, not a huge celebration, something small, but that accomplishment gives you the juice to move on to that second 10%. How many of you have ever created for yourself a to-do list? Most professional people periodically do a to-do list. I've got one sitting right there on my desk. And you either check things off or scratch things off. How many of you have ever thought, this to-do list that I just put together, that thing I just did should have gone on this list. You'll write it on the list for purposes of scratching it off or checking it off moments later. Why would grown adult professional people do that? Answer, dopamine. Dopamine is that chemical that's released in the body in one of two situations. You've lost something, suddenly you find it, your keys or your wallet. That rush you feel is dopamine. But secondly, when it happens more often, is a simple sense of accomplishment or achievement. And when we will segment our work, that is hugely successful, hugely powerful for most people in being able to get to the finish line. One of my colleagues is a Navy SEAL. His name is Scott Daly, active duty for 11 and a half years. When he was first about to go through Hell Week, a ridiculously intense 5-day period, he was so concerned about that, called a cousin who had been a SEAL based in Virginia for about 15 years. And Scott started talking about, boy, I'm really concerned about this. And the cousin said, Scott, they have to feed you. Scott said, I'm not following you. And the cousin said, don't think about 5 days. Think about 5 hours at a time. And you throw everything you've got, your entire focus, into going from lunch, from breakfast to lunch. From lunch, all your focus on is getting to dinner. From dinner, they're going to feed you during that time, typically again about midnight, because the exercises go deep into the night. Just get to that midnight meal. When you get up the next morning, just do the same thing. And Scott said that he saw so many guys, dozens of people, walk over and ring that bell. That's how you drop out of the SEALs. There's a bell on the beach and you ring it 3 times, and that indicates I'm out. And Scott saw bigger, faster, more athletic, stronger people go ring that bell because their focus was on 5 days. I can't possibly do this for 5 days. Scott was just trying to get through 5 hours. The power of bite-sized chunks. And then one other piece on Step Up, because this is so important right now, friends. We are going through some adversity. We are going through some change. Call it whatever you want to. There's all sorts of names for adversity, challenges or problems or issues or obstacles or hurdles or whatever. But CV-19 brought with it to our country some adversity, some change. And we've got to be resilient in the face of that. And as I've talked, the workshops that I did last week with 2 Ohio schools, we talked about predictable events. We've already touched on it today. Predictable events that we know are coming, and how can we be ready for them? And we talked about the self-talk that drives that, because self-talk is so important. And over, these 2 groups of administrators kept using this phrase: we got this. We got this. Got a chance to talk with Suzanne and Tony before this got started, and we used that phrase together several times. Hey, this is tough. This isn't the way anybody wanted to start school. We get it. But it's the hand we've been dealt. Let's deal with it with resilience. And we got this. And I have no doubt, there's no doubt in my mind that the Thunderbolts have got this as school kicks off again here soon. The 4th piece is adjust and adapt. We had talked about the importance of this, and a big piece of it is how you frame. That's not just a word. There's a psychological charge behind that word. How do you frame change? Is it a threat? Does it cause you stress, frustration, anxiety? Do you BCD about it, or do you realize that change is a necessity? It is an opportunity. And for those individuals and organizations, including schools, that deal with change well, it will be a competitive advantage for you. Don't make change a threat like that slide just showed. Instead, make it a competitive advantage. Don't seek protection in the comfort zone again, and especially right now. Your comfort zone and mine is an illusion. Do embrace, however, the productive discomfort, not discomfort just for the sake of being uncomfortable, but the productive discomfort that change requires. And then finally, don't procrastinate, drag your feet. Don't think, okay, here comes this new initiative. This new change is coming that requires something different of me. I don't like it, so I'm just going to try to run out the clock. I'll just take the air out of the ball. I'm going to drag my feet. Instead of that, accelerate and get busy making the changes that you need to make to get better. Fifthly, make a difference. This is the shift from inward to outward, from internal to external, and realize this actually, that your response becomes an E for others. So many different ways that I could illustrate, and I'll do it this way. There's a coach in Ohio, football coach, who's a big fan of Focus 3, had been to one of our workshops, listened to the podcast, he was into it, had this much R-Factor knowledge. He was coaching a small group of people that included another football coach, and they had just gotten started. This second coach had this much R-Factor knowledge. And the second coach, with not much knowledge, gets a call one night from a former Marine. And this Marine said, "Coach, I'm dealing with a lot of stuff. I'm thinking about committing suicide." And this second coach with this much knowledge starts talking to this young man. I don't know if he was a former student, a former player, just a friend from the community. I don't know. But this young man reached out in a time of need, and this coach talks to him for about 2 hours. And at the 2-hour mark, he remembers this concept right here. And something clicks with him, and he says, "Son, you can't do this, because this is going to be your reaction to the events of your world, but you are going to leave behind a huge event for the people in your circle to deal with, and you can't do that." And something clicked within the young man, and he said, "You're right, Coach, I can't do that. I won't do that." He's gotten some counseling, and the story has a happy ending. But when that TK sent that story via email to us 17 months ago, March a year ago, and Scott, our Navy SEAL colleague, replied a couple hours later once he had a chance to review it, and he replied to everybody, and he said, at that point, he had been with us about 4 years. And he said, "Guys, I've been with the company 4 years. I've heard this same type of story 3 times. Your R becomes an E for others, and it leads to this statement. Your response or reaction it's frequently deeply personal, but it is rarely private. And I want you to think about how you can respond and just some things that you can do. Teachers are phenomenal at this. What can you do to create a positive experience for the people around you, even if that has to be virtual for a season? And let me introduce you to a term. You may have heard this, maybe not, but this little phrase in the quotation marks, this word is pronounced lanyap. It's a Cajun word that means that little something extra. And as we go into this type of year, at least the beginning of this type of school year, it's entirely appropriate for you to be thinking, how can I add that little something extra, a positive experience for the kids in my classroom, for my colleagues? People are going to need some help. People are going to need some giddy up. And hopefully you're there to provide them a little lanyap. It's a good segue to this slide. Down the left-hand side of the slide is how we convey an experience, how people experience us. Again, all the way back to culture, what you believe, how you behave, the experience that you deliver to others. How do we deliver experience? Attitude, action, and words. Attitude is huge. It's one of my favorite words in the English language. I have two, attitude and team. Attitude is huge. Action is huge. We've all heard the phrase, probably since we were little guys and gals, actions speak louder than words. That's true. If there's a misalignment between action and words, people will always put more weight in your action than your words. But let me just speak briefly about the importance of words, especially right now. These three, you know this, these three pieces are tethered together, and to untether one from the other is very difficult. People feel your attitude, they see your action, they hear your words, and just like I mentioned moments ago, people right now especially are going to need some words of encouragement, some words of thanks, some words of affirmation, some words of gratitude, just some positive words. And my point is, when we're in a workshop, roughly half the people raise their hand that attitude is the most important. Roughly the other half will raise their hand for action. I'm here to say that our words, the words that you choose to use, and myself, are both important and powerful. And especially for a group of educators, you can change the trajectory of someone's life by the words that you use, the positive, encouraging words that you use, as opposed to so many people who speak in haste. Their words are out of haste, they're out of context, they're out of anger, etc. It is entirely appropriate to have this conversation with a group of educators right on the lip of the cup of going back into a new school year. The only place where it is more appropriate to have this conversation about the importance and the power of our words is with a group of parents. And I know that many of you wear that same hat. So when I say, hey, words of encouragement, especially right now to your kiddos, absolutely think, please, on it on two levels, at least two levels. The kids in your home and the kids in your classroom, the kids at your school. Let's talk about build skill. And this is the piece that TK has become so passionate about. It's something that we'll call the edge. I'll get there in just a moment. What is your plan? I'll come back to that, for building the skills for the life that you want. Some people get 4 words into this question. They say, what is my plan? That's something about the life I want. Wait a minute, I don't even have a plan for lunch. Are you kidding me? No, we're dead serious. What's your plan for building the skills for the life that you want? Keep in mind that the process of building skill is slow, small, and daily. And you know this as educators, but that flies in the face of a culture that tries to convince people that what's really important is the fast, the big, and the right now. But building skill, learning, growth is slow, small, and daily. And it leads us to this point right here about the edge. This has become the centerpiece of R6 build skill. And this is my one word, as Tony talked about for this year. My word is edge. Between where you are now and where you can be, where you're going perhaps, there's often this piece that prevents you from getting there. It represents a barrier of sorts. It represents a get better moment. It's called the edge. And here's how we set it up. Your world at some point begins to send you signals that it wants you to get better. Maybe that's professionally, maybe that's personally, maybe that's both. It can involve building a new skill. It can involve taking a skill that you already have and making it better. But you get this message unmistakably that your world wants you to get better. And that conversation often happens at the edge. And there's lots of people who think about that, and they'll say these things to themselves, sometimes even out loud. Okay, I hear you. I need to get better, but boy, that seems hard. That feels like it's going to be hard. Feels like it's going to be risky. That feels like it could be uncomfortable. What if I fail? And some people are so allergic to that word, they'll even change one letter. What if I fall? What if I fall in front of my colleagues or my family? And after all, I'm pretty good. Life's pretty good. Keep in mind, friends, that elite people break through the edge, and the enemy of elite is not bad, it's good, or perhaps good enough. And there's people who bump into this edge and they think, you know what? To break through this, it too hard, too risky, too uncomfortable, too whatever, fill in the blank here. I think things are good enough as they are. I'm out. Pass, hard pass. There's others who give it a try and don't realize just how hard it's going to be, and they bump into this edge a couple of times and then they're out. But there's a third group of people, a third bucket. And these are the people that have this conversation with themselves. Well, of course it's going to be hard. But getting better, breaking through the edge, starts with saying yes to the hard things. Sure, it's going to be risky. I might fail, but so what? Everybody fails. Everybody falls. And if I fall, I will pick myself up, dust myself off. I will drop back, not to punt, but I'm going to drop back. I'm going to go again at this thing harder and smarter. And eventually they break through this edge and they get better. I'd love to tell you that for all of us, there's exactly one edge, but you know better than that, don't you? And some people will break through one and go break through another one. There's some people who just get better They get really good at getting better. And the truly elite people don't wait for an edge to come along. The truly elite people break through one, they go looking for the next one. And again, it involves saying yes to the hard things. It involves putting ourselves out there. It can be risky, of course, it can be uncomfortable, but people who master their personal edge, and then another one, and then another one, those are the elite people. Those are the people striving to be the best versions of themselves. One more Houston story for you here, and I want to end our time this way. I've got a couple more slides after this, but I want to tell you a quick story, if I could, about Bob Onstead. I want to introduce you by way of this picture in this story to Mr. Onstead. He is pictured here with his lovely wife, Kay. He actually passed away. It was a week ago. If you go back a week ago, and then 16 years, it was early August of 2004. He was the co-founder and became the CEO of Randall's Food Market's major grocery store chain. At one point, they had 114 grocery stores in and around the greater Houston area. I want to take you back to the early years of Mr. Onstead's tenure with Randall's, and also as a fairly young father. His 4 kids were fairly young. They weren't babies, but they were not adults either, somewhere in between. And the Onsteads rented an RV, and they were going to take their kids on vacation and do a cross-country trip. And they're driving along in Arizona at one point, and all of a sudden there's this red sports car behind them with 2 young men and 2 young ladies in the sports car, and they felt like that the Onsteads' RV was going way too slow. So they start honking the horn. There's some hand gestures, we're number one kind of stuff. And they're really giving this RV a hard time because they can't get around the Onstead's RV. Finally, there's a break in the traffic. They go whipping around, yell some horrible things, and take off at 100 miles an hour down this highway. Well, you could guess what happens next. About 10 miles, no more than 15 miles down that same road, there's that red convertible sports car on the side of the road with a flat tire. Mr. Onstead pulls off to the side of the road and pulls the RV up behind this car. And he starts to get up, and his kids all of a sudden realize, hey, wait a minute, our dad's going to go help these people, and they are not into it. And they said, Dad, don't you remember? Those are the people. And they're carrying on. And Mr. Onstead raised his right hand. He said, stop. And he climbed down out of that RV, and he went over, and these folks didn't know how to change a tire. Mr. Onstead did know how to change a tire, and he changed their tire, and he realized that this little spare tire is only going to get them into the next town, and he gave them some money to buy a new tire in the next town along that highway. He goes to get back into the RV. He climbs back in. Of course, the kids and Kay, they've all watched this. The kids are really on him. Dad, I can't believe that. Those people were so rude. Those people were crude and yelled some horrible things, and you helped them, and they just go on. And finally he raises his hand again. He says, stop. And then he made this statement. We're not going to let the way other people treat us affect the way we treat other people. What an amazing lesson for a group of young kiddos, maybe a couple into their teens. What an amazing dad. What an amazing statement. And isn't this the type of statement that we need to hear right now on all sorts of different levels? We think about what's going on in our country right now and coronavirus, and we've got, Tony even talked about it, about some racial tension and so many other things, economic issues and the medical and all of it, the political, that's huge. And you roll it all together. And I thought, how do I want to end my time with Northmont? What do I want to say? And I thought about that story that I had heard years ago. I went to church for several years, about a dozen years, with the Onstead family. And I've heard that story for years, hadn't pulled it out in a long time. But I thought, you know what? This may be just right for right now. And I want to share that with you. And I'll leave this up on the screen for for an extended time. I've got one more slide, but I want you to think through this, and I want you to internalize this, and I want to encourage you as best as you can to follow the words of Bob Onstead. We're not going to let the way other people treat us affect the way we treat other people. And here's my closing shot for you. This is my closing thought. And I put this slide together 2 weeks ago, and it has been inserted at the end of every workshop, every keynote, whether it's virtual, in person. Anytime I'm in front of a school, from now, even really for the first few months of the year, they're going to get to see this slide. And the words are chosen carefully here. And it's the R factor. We don't get to choose. We don't have the option to choose the events, the situations, the circumstances that are going to occur during this next school year that we're going to call 2020/2021. We don't have that option. But we do have the option every single day, every single event, every single situation. We do get to choose how we respond. And I want you to keep that in mind. These last two slides, we're not going to let the way other people treat us affect the way we treat other people. And we get to choose our response regardless of the events that come along. And then the last piece here in white, and I'll hush. We wish for you guys, for the Thunderbolts, the most awesome year ever. And if you're thinking, are you kidding me? I want you to alter that thinking, even just for a moment, but ideally for an entire school year. Everybody's going into this thing thinking this is going to be awful. What if it's amazing? What if it's not awful? What if it's awesome? What if we just crush this? And as these events come at us, these situations come at us, what if we handle these things, we respond well with skill and grace? And what if this is, I'm convinced this is going to be a school year to remember. Absolutely. What if it is a school year to remember on the positive side, not the negative side? And we get to choose the kind of attitude that we go into this school year with. And I just want to say to you, I hope you have an awesome year. And I hope it exceeds all your expectations. And I'm for you. Suzanne and Tony heard this early on. Man, I am pulling so hard for you guys. And I speak for all of my colleagues. We recognize, all of the folks at Focus 3 recognize that this is a challenging year for education and everybody else. But we're pulling for you. We're pulling hard. And we wish you nothing but the best. Thank you so much for allowing me to be a part of this. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, but I'll hang in there in case anybody has any questions or thoughts. But thank you so much for letting me be a part of this. Go Thunderbolts.
Am I back on, Suzanne?
You're on.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you so much, Derek. And let me say that Derek had an opportunity to practice E plus R equals O because he was very, very excited to be able to tell people he has given a presentation in the Thunderdome. And that opportunity was taken away from him. The event changed, but he responded, and what an outcome. Great job. Thank you for challenging us on an individual basis today. And I just have to reaffirm what we said before we got started. We've got this. We can do this. We are on the edge of something elite. And I say we, and the reason we are on the edge of something elite is because personally, everybody wants the best version of themselves. I know that, I believe in that, and that's what's going to make this an elite year. So thank you, Derek. I don't know if you can still respond or where we are with the technology on that.
Yeah, Tony, I'm still with you. I sure appreciate the kind words. I'll sign off and let you be about the rest of your Wednesday. Thanks so much.
All right. Thank you so much.
You bet.
One last thing.
Well, again, thank you. I know that there's a full day ahead, so at this point, we'll let you follow the plans that either your principal or your supervisor had. If you have any questions about what was presented, certainly contact any of us. We are excited about this year, and we will do great things as we enter from being great to elite. Thank you.